Alright, so what the fuck even is a Rancor? I mean, I know what comes to mind for me. That creature from Star Wars that's said to be inspired by a bear crossed with a potato, I believe I read somewhere. But the ones in Elden Ring do not resemble the ones from Star Wars in any way, shape, or form outside of the name, and I think they're mainly based on the actual definition of Rancor, which is a bitter and deep-seated ill will or resentment. They appear as these enlarged, burning skulls, seemingly propelled by the cold ghost flame itself. They generally look like something out of one of those classic dungeon crawler 2D games, or more recently, but still pretty old, the Dungeon Skulls in Terraria, a very underrated game. Anyway, though, the Rancor are mainly used as offensive spells, and they scale in both faith and intelligence, as they fall under the death sorcery category, as evidenced by the sorcery's casting symbol being a curse mark of death. But like lore-wise, what are these things? First, we'd have to understand what the ghost flame is. Before the Erd Tree came to prominence and America sealed away destined death, allowing everybody to constantly be reincarnated, people actually died, and their death rites, they appear to be pretty fucked. I mean, you have the Mausoleum Knights who behead themselves. That's part of the death rites, judging by the sacrificial hatchet. And the cost for their abilities is their head and possibly their demigod that they serve's head as well. You can imagine the old death rites were a lot more, I guess the word barbaric would be used here, but I prefer metal. But anyway, back in this day, death had its very own outer god in the form of the twin bird, who was sort of like its Elden beast in that it basically was its acting avatar in the lands between. The actual outer god of death is never really named, we just know that the twin bird was its vassal. Now the twin bird was the god of the death birds, probably their progenitor too. So how death worked during this age in the lands between was relatively simple. When you died, your body was burned in the cold ghost flame and the ashes were raked out by death birds. Now if you happen to be lucky enough to meet your end in battle, then you would see the green lampposts or lampwoods of Helfin that would guide you to a spirit world, which is really the only mention of an afterlife that I've found so far throughout the game. These lampposts were said to be similar to grace in appearance, but were only visible to those who had met their death in battle. And yeah, that's all well in Norse and all, but what about those that didn't die worthy deaths? Well, when their bodies were burned and their ashes were raked out of the kilns, they would arise again as rancors, vengeful spirits, living manifestations, well, I guess not quite living, unliving manifestations of their own anguish and resentment and bitter scorn and despair from not getting into the afterlife. Now in the game there's 3 different kind of Rancor spells that you can get a hold of. 4 if you count the weapon art on the family heads. But since the age of the Erd Tree came around, the art of summoning Rancors was thought to be lost. That is until an old sage by the name of Garris came around and murdered his family, his wife and kids, and burned them in the cold ghost flame and raked out their ashes, and thus Rancor arose, familial Rancor. He presumably made a flail out of their remains. The heads on it are likely too small to be their actual heads, but he could have shrunken them like doing some weird magic and then coated them in copper, dipped them right in a vat of copper. But anyway, this fucking guy rediscovered the art of summoning Rancors. The ones that summon from his weapon are basically identical to the ones from the Rancor call spell, but the ones that are summoned from the ancient death Rancor appear to leave a trail of deathbird feathers in their wake, suggesting the connection between the two, and probably why it's called an ancient death Rancor. Those spirits died during that age. Whereas the ones summoned by Rancor call and familial Rancor probably died during the current age. And lastly we have Reichard's Rancor, a mix of a magma hex and a death hex brought about by Reichard's meddling and commingling with the great serpent that lived underneath Mount Gelmir. These are the very spirits, or what's left of the spirits, of the many heroes that Reichard consumed over the ages. Any poor bastard who won a dinner with him, from the Volcano Manor raffle to the noblest of questing warriors, were added to the serpent family in the most violent of ways. The fact that they became Rancor is interesting, but it's probably because they held bitter resentment towards Reichard for what he did to them, and likely a good deal of anguish at how their quest turned out. And of course all that mixed up with the weird hex magic that comes from Mount Gelmir. Well, that's really all I have to say right now about the Rancors. I just wanted to do a little video about it. And it'll definitely be mentioned in that video too, but I wanted to do a smaller one covering my knowledge on it. Anyway, if you liked the video, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you have any counter theories or arguments or noticed anything I got wrong, please share that in the comments, or just, share whatever in the comments. I really, always interested in hearing theories. But without further ado, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a good one and see ya. I'll see you tomorrow or the next day.